committee knows, anything that was scheduled for tomorrow will be moved to Thursday, and anything scheduled Thursday will be moved to Friday. First item on the agenda is bill hearing on House Bill 2310, and with a description on the bill, Charles Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2310 makes a number of changes in law with respect to the Department for Aging and Disability Services. The first section just states the name of the act. The second section is a number of definitions that are relevant to the rest of the act, and we'll probably come back to that here in just a bit. Section 3 provides that the department should develop career education programs, and the idea here is to pursue development, supportive career education programs for careers in disability services. The department is tasked to work with the Kansas State Department of Education and develop programs that both for high school and also for community college students about careers as direct support professionals, and also attempt to develop community or technical college programs that would prepare students for those careers. And then there's a number of provisions that the department should consider in doing that work on the bottom of page 2 and top of page 3 of the bill. New section 4 requires the secretary to work with the Department of Administration to develop and adopt a performance-based contract program. And as part of that, the contracts are to withhold a portion of the state payments to contractors until their contract quality terms are met. And there are a number of goals that the secretary is to achieve with respect to this program. They're listed starting at the bottom half of page 3, starting out with attempting to decrease use of hospital emergency departments, reduction of preventable admissions to hospitals, and also 30-day hospital readmissions, improvement of prenatal care, improvement of integration of physical and behavioral health, including follow-up care after a mental illness or substance use disorder admission, better use of pharmacies, pharmacy utilization, including the use of incentive arrangements, enhancement of substance abuse treatment, identification of social determinants of health and development, and attempt to utilize such information to improve health, attempting to better address needs of patients that are boarded in hospital emergency departments, waiting for placements or services, identification of emerging public health trends, and development of a required standard for completion of specified advanced training by one or more disability service workers employed by the contractor. So a specific requirement that kind of ties into career development there, that there be some career training as part of the contract. In addition, the secretary is to require managed care organizations to adopt a total cost of care model when developing this performance-based contract program for smaller providers. The secretary is to take into consideration a smaller provider's capacity and make special provisions for smaller providers. New section 5 pertains to procedures and guidelines that the secretary is tasked to develop that would allow persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities greater choice when selecting the services. And also, there's a requirement that on or before December 31, 2025, the Secretary is to establish a statewide registry for direct support workers. This would facilitate, of course, the enhanced choice for folks with intellectual and physical disabilities. And the Secretary is to publish that registry on the website so that individuals can have a better idea of the services and persons who can provide those services that would be available to them. New Section 6 provides that on or after October 1st, 2025, the Secretary is to expand the tracking of labor statistics and information with respect to disability services support professionals. That would include currently open positions, anticipated needs, and also the number of qualified workers in the state to address those needs. And the Secretary is to do that in collaboration with the Secretary of Labor. Section 7 on page 5 toward the bottom provides for the establishment and development of an online data portal system on the Secretary's website. The purpose of that system would be to support waiting list management, provide wait list and waiver program information, enable and facilitate communication between the department and individuals on a waiver wait list. The program is to have the capability of monitoring performance and staffing across all waiver programs. And there is a deadline there that the program, the system, should be developed and implemented on or before December 31st, 2026. The Secretary is to make quarter reports to the Legislature on the progress of developing and implementing that system. The online data portal system is to provide public access with respect to non-confidential information regarding waiver waitlist and waiver programs. And a big part of this system is communication with individuals with disabilities and their families with respect to accuracy of information provided to the department, updates to that information, the ability to submit questions to the department, and facilitate the production of services in that matter. And there are a number of specific items on through page 6 and the top of page 7 that is to be implemented as part of that system. Section 8 provides that employees of disability services providers would be eligible for Kansas health care benefits. And the disability services provider, there is a definition for that. I would direct your attention to the Section 2. And there's a definition on sort of on the top of page 2 there. It means a public or private agency or organization or a subdivision or subunit of the same. That is a developmental or intellectual disability services provider that provides one or more health, supportive, attendant care, or other disability services in accordance with rules and regulations adopted by the Secretary for a fee by direct support professionals or personal care attendants, and those are also defined terms for individuals with developmental or intellectual disabilities. So employees of a disability services provider would be eligible for the Kansas health care program, and that is what the bill does.
All right, committee, any questions on what this bill is attempting to do? I believe you nailed it, sir. Thank you. All right, so we have 2 bills today, and it looks like, by my count, there are at least 12 oral presenters. And so in order to get through both these bills, we're going to have to limit testimony to 4 minutes a person, and that'll allow a little bit of time for questions. And my vice chair will keep track of the time. First up, this proponent has requested to go first so that she can get out of town and get back safely before the snowstorm hits. And we will go ahead and allow her to go first. And we're looking for Stacy Crow. May need some assistance with the microphone. Thanks, Representative.
Right here's probably good. Thank you. So, good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. This is my daughter, Taylor, my daughter, Sophia, and myself, Stacy Crow. I am here as a proponent of House Bill 2310 for the CARES Act. I submitted my testimony, and I'm just going to highlight on some points of it. One of the main things is that when you have a child that's on the waiver, the IDD waiver is what my two daughters are on here, there's varying degrees, obviously. I mean, because they're both on the same waiver, but both require absolutely different types of care. And so I want to make that a point that there is so much training that goes into Sophia's care. We had a fabulous CNA that did she wasn't a CNA at the time. She came to us about 3 years ago. She stayed with us for as long as she could. She was absolutely our favorite. And unfortunately, she got her CNA and saw other opportunities and career paths because basically there was nowhere to go. There was no insurance, there was no sick leave, there was no career path. It was pretty much kind of a, even though she loved it, and she even continued to do it part-time after she became a CNA, she finally moved on to the hospital setting. And so I'm just here to say that there's just such a huge need for this to become a career path so that people realize the value and the dignity in helping others and not just feel like it's kind of like a dead-end job. I mean, there is so much that goes in to what they do for my children. And what they've done is given my children so much back. And I just want to say, I mean, you can read through my testimony for more detail, but first there's a shortage, obviously. We don't have enough care providers. We lack care providers. We struggle to find anybody. There's not really any competitive career path for it to become a career path for anybody that wants to be a caregiver. And I mean, being a caregiver is amazing. I mean, they just don't know how much we appreciate what they do for us, for my children, and everything. And then just if there was a process in which they could continue growing, trainings, move up, a career path for them so that they also are gaining, and then also the varying degrees of needs that every child on the waiver, everybody's individual. So what one child, I mean, Sophia's literally close to the nursing level, but that's not where she's at. And then, Taylor obviously is not. And so there's so much more to learn when you take care of Sophia. So much more training, so many more things that could go into it to improve her quality of life. So anyways, I thank you for your time, and I ask that you would consider this bill for our children and our families. I mean, there's not just children, there's adults that are on these waivers. And so thank you for your time, and I'll stand at the appropriate time for any questions.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming up today, and we will go ahead and open questions for you right now so that you can get on your way.
Thank you.
So we had this discussion this morning in appropriations. I don't know if you tuned into that, but we talked about the IDD waiver list and funding to remove more individuals from that waiting list, and the fact that we have a lack of service providers, which is why I was so excited about this bill when they first approached me. And this is an important bill, in my opinion. May need some changes, but it's a step in the right direction, because we have two issues. We have a funding issue with the waiting list. There's still over 4,000 individuals on that waiting list. We can't get to them even if we had the funding, because there's not enough service providers, and they would be taking away service providers from those that are already receiving service. And so it's my opinion that this bill is important, and this bill will go a long ways in helping both of those. Any questions for our conferee? All right, seeing none. Thanks so much for coming in and making your case.
Thank you for your time.
James Mickens. Is there a James Mickens here? That's oral testimony. Okay, we'll move your testimony to written. If you end up here, we'll call you one last time before we're done. Mike Burgess. Welcome back to committee.
Howdy. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I'm Mike Burgess with the Disability Rights Center, Kansas. I'm excited to be here as a proponent. I think having a hearing in this committee with this kind of a comprehensive approach to address the shortage of direct service providers is immensely important. So there, as Charles did an excellent job of describing, there are a number of things in the bill that are very positive, good things, not the least of which is the career ladder, the maintaining a registry, attempting to try and have discussion around removing barriers. We've had a lot of discussions, different places, healthcare, paid leave, retirement benefits, like those are all things that are lacking today. So adding the healthcare component is an important piece to help make sure that we, when you get good folks, that they can afford to remain and be a caregiver. One little change that's in my testimony that I wanted to do is a lot of the language appears to be more agency-driven, looking at how we can help agencies to do this. There is a significant part of on the IDD waiver individuals who self-direct their services. And so we want to make sure that they also, with their staff, are able to access the benefits and good things within this program. And so that's where we want to specifically call out. And there's probably some other places too where you may want to consider adding that language or making sure that impact extends to people who self-direct their services as well. But the portal is also another big piece for people on the waiting list to know where they're at, verify their contact information. Also be able to indicate how they prefer to be communicated with, whether it's a text message or email. Unfortunately, historically, we've been very snail mail focused. And as you all know, that isn't the best way to communicate with people anymore. They're certainly not as the only mechanism. So again, lots of good things in the bill, and just happy to be here and share our support for this, and want to urge your support as well. So, and I'd be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
All right, any questions for Mr. Burgess? Representative Williams, Christy Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and apologies if this has already been discussed. But so starting this e-academy program, if I'm saying the right term here, for direct support professional workers or direct support workers, if individuals are already in this field, would they be recommended to go through this process, and then are those that in the future choose to go through this process, what if others do not? I'm assuming that this wouldn't be a requirement for working in this field, correct?
So I'm going to defer, rather than guess, I'm going to defer to others. I am a member or sit on the Kansas DD Council who spent a lot of time working on this legislation within some of their work groups. So they might be better equipped, or the revisor or agency may be better equipped to answer that. So I'm sorry, Representative.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Okay. All right, next up. Is there an Allison McCain? Welcome to committee.
Oh, there we go. Hello. Good afternoon, Chairman Tarwater and members of the committee. My name is Allison McCain. I am the Deputy Director with the Kansas Council on Developmental Disabilities. On behalf of the Kansas Council, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of House Bill 2310. We are grateful for your leadership, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Laura Williams for your dedication to the disability community by introducing this vital bill to enhance the essential disability workforce in Kansas. I want to also take a moment to thank the legislature for your commitment to reducing the IDD and wait list in Kansas. This bill helps us address the other side of the equation, like you said, Chairman Tarwater, building our current and future workforce. So our mission at the council is to empower individuals with IDD and their families to lead systems change, build advocacy, and build capacity and advocate for inclusive, integrated communities where everyone belongs and thrives. We strongly encourage the committee to support the Kansas CARES Act to invest in one of the largest workforce in Kansas, approximately 26,000 professionals across all populations. I want to echo Mike's comments earlier too regarding self-direction. We do support the addition of that language. This bill would provide evidence-based best practice and offer solutions to recruit, retain, and reward frontline workers, such as direct support workers, which are expected to have a 17% increase in demand over the next decade. The impetus for this bill stems from the work that we did at the Kansas Council with our IDD Health Coalition, which includes over 60 organizations, self-advocates, parents, and caregivers. We also included recommendations from important state investments by the legislature and Kansas taxpayers, which are included and cited in our written testimony. As you all know, Kansans with IDD and their families have been struggling for over 2 decades to find DSWs, who are essential in providing in-home care, daily living support, and community participation. This is not unique to Kansas. Other states are struggling with this as well, but this requires our state to advance a state solution to address this crisis, and we feel strongly that this bill does just that. In our written testimony, you will see that a lot of the key provisions in the bill have background information on where they're sourced from. These are not new concepts. This bill just puts the legislature's hard work into action. And we also provided a list of estimated costs for the recommendations to KDADs, including the adoption of the certified training program. Again, not recreating the wheel. Some of these training programs already exist at WSU. The KU Career Ladder is creating training modules. This would just create a statewide infrastructure for years to come to have a pay increase relative to the amount of training that you've accomplished. And to answer your question, Representative Williams, it would not be required, but there would be an incentive to do the training. There could also be a way for us to look at how many hours the person has already given as a DSW and have that also equal a number of training credentials. And that's something that the KU study has been looking at. We also said that roughly $500,000 would be needed to implement a 2-year college degree program based on the national average, and the contracting with the financial management services to manage the independent budget authority with the cost of $750,000 state dollars with a 50% admin match from the federal government with a total budget of $1.5 million over the next 2 years. We thank you, committee, for your consideration, and I will stand for questions now.
All right, thank you. Committee, any questions? And thank you for answering her last question. All right, seeing none.
Okay, thanks.
I'm not showing any other oral proponents. Come forward. You just please introduce yourself. Do we have your testimony?
You should have written and a request for oral from Megan Shreve from Interhab.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Chair Tarwater and members of the committee. Today I'll share testimony.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you submitted oral neutral testimony.
Correct.
Is there, before you start, is there any other proponent that wants to speak orally? Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Holly Olson. I am a lead direct support professional for Honeybee Community Services. We serve approximately 120 individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, helping them live as independently as possible. DSPs are the brakes and gas for an individual. The person served remains at the wheel with full control of their lives. I asked one of my clients, how has Honeybee helped improve your life? And they said, everyone is very kind, helpful, and generous. I love Honeybee. My staff ask me questions about what I want. They help me with cooking, finances, and getting involved with my peers. Despite having a key role in the lives of people who live with a disability, they endure a 50% turnover rate and staffing on average. I have worked with one of my clients for over a year. He thrives on consistency and support and doesn't do well with change. This turnover rate has affected him greatly. He worked with 3 specific staff that he truly loved. They were there when he found out his grandfather passed. They helped him prepare for job interviews, assisted in making good choices at the grocery store, helped budget his funds, and managed his medication and personal care tasks. Within 3 months, his world was flipped upside down when all 3 of his preferred staff left. This left him with a ton of emotions, including abandonment, trust, and attachment issues. He often states he doesn't trust people because they're here one day and gone the next. I'm still working hard to build this trust, but after a year, I am finally one of his preferred staff. I want to emphasize that while this industry is not for everyone, those who choose to become DSPs wear many hats and play a vital role in our community. By implementing a comprehensive training program for DSPs in Kansas, we can address the high turnover rate and ensure that our clients receive consistent and high-quality support. Standardizing training, salaries, and benefits across agencies will not only enhance the effectiveness of our workforce, but also attract dedicated individuals to this profession. This job is incredibly rewarding, and by creating an educational pathway for students, we can introduce them to this important field and ensure that our DSPs are well prepared and valued. Thank you for your time.
All right, committee, any questions? All right, seeing none. Any other proponent? Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Zoe Damon. I graduated from Pittsburgh State University in 2017 with a degree in therapeutic recreation and corporate wellness. After college, I moved to Germany where I began working in the DSP field and experienced a different type of direct support working environment and style. I worked there for about 7 years and recently moved back to the US where I now have been working as a lead DSP at Honeybee for 1 year. My experience working in this position has been filled with challenges, laughter, and learning. Considering this job title is potentially not well known around the world, let alone in Kansas, I feel that it is partially my responsibility to advocate for this field, position, and individuals with disabilities. In my personal opinion, advocating is the best way to bring awareness to a topic, as well as bringing awareness to the downsides that occasionally come along with this role. Oftentimes, we are not viewed as holding the role of essential workers. This is fortunately not the case. This career absolutely falls into this category. Not only are we supporting individuals with disabilities in a physical way, we also act as teachers, role models, therapists, and caregivers. Since working for Honeybee, I have met so many unique and wonderful individuals. I have one specific in mind. We will call him Jay. Jay has always been someone who struggles with change. Together, we have implemented a routine for Jay that has stayed consistent and improved the quality of his life. He has become more focused on his responsibilities and has been able to maintain a more stable and consistent day-to-day at work and in his personal life. Having consistency within this field is very important as it provides a stable environment for clients. If we can improve the turnover rate within the DSP field, this would be extremely beneficial to individuals with disabilities, keep consistent staffing, and help improve their overall quality of life. I believe that this bill would be very beneficial to a plethora of individuals. It would not only promote this work to others, but it would also give insight to everyone currently working in this role as well. Implementing a higher pay rate across the board would also help ensure that the turnover rate for DSPs would be significantly lowered. Fixing the DSP shortage would also bring more support to the individuals with disabilities that are needed. This is very important considering the amount of DSPs available are directly related to supporting people in need. DSPs are expected to have a 15% growth rate over the next 10 years. This means that roughly 86,000 new DSP jobs will be needed. With that being said, considering we will be needed and very essential, the implementation of a higher pay rate would be necessary. In hopes that this bill will be passed, I want to thank you for your time and consideration.
All right, committee, any questions? All right, I'm not seeing your testimony. Did you send it in?
Yes.
Okay. We'll continue to look for that, but would you do us a favor and resend it to the Commerce website? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. No questions. Any other proponents? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to neutral and Interhab. You can come back up. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much, Chair Tarwater, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to share testimony on House Bill 2310. My name is Megan Shreve, and I'm the Associate Director for Interhab, and I'm here today representing providers of intellectual and developmental disabilities across Kansas. While the aim of 2310 in furthering professionalization of DSPs is laudable, Interhab's members share a number of concerns with the bill. Today, I'll share a neutral testimony for the bill and areas which require further attention and consideration. With necessary improvements, this bill could earn our support. The first area I would like to address is Section 3C related to career development for DSPs. We are incredibly supportive of efforts to develop greater professionalism with the DSP workforce and have developed a registered apprenticeship program for DSPs across Kansas in 2023. We did this in partnership with the Kansas Department of Commerce. The program is one of the things I'm most proud of in my work at Interhab, and as of today, I have personally enrolled more than 100 DSPs across Kansas in this program. Each apprentice completes formal curriculum through the Wichita State University Badge Program, which consists of 360 hours of formal curriculum and provides college credit at the same time. Apprentices also complete 12 months of on-the-job training and mentorship and leave the program with a nationally recognized credential. We know that providers are underfunded, and this apprenticeship program is offered at no cost to participants and providers because of federal funds through the U.S. Department of Labor. We recommend that the bill remove reference to NADSP-specific costly training and that the participation of any training is voluntary. In addition, funding should always be included to cover professional development for DSPs. I would next refer to Section 4A. Interhab supports the language included in the CanCare contracts that direct managed care organizations to pursue exploration of value-based payments. We are very supportive of that, and this section just appears not to be germane to the bill's greater focus on workforce development and may also be unnecessary based on the language in the current MCO contracts. We recommend this section be explored further or removed. Section 5A. In speaking with Interhab members, we agree that the language in this section is aspirational, but have major concerns about how the execution of self-direction would be successful. Members have shared that the transition to self-direction for individuals in Kansas remains difficult due to the lack of workers, which you've heard over and over today, and the need for an overall better system. That being said, with KDAD's plans for multiple large-scale IDD system changes right now, there would be a further need for exploration and the inclusion of families, individuals, and providers. We would recommend the exploration of this section with full engagement of stakeholders prior to moving forward. Section 5B regarding rates. This language, again, appears not to be germane with the rest of the bill's focus, which is the development of DSP workforce, and we would recommend it be removed from the bill. And the last section I'll address is the state health plan. After I submitted this, Oh, okay. I'm almost done. After I submitted this testimony, I heard from InterHab members that shared they already are a part of the state health plan if they want to be, but it's been too costly for them to participate. Others continue to explore it. Again, it needs to be explored for viability. We want to be supportive of this bill. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Committee, any questions? Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony here today, madam. I'm unfamiliar. InterHab, is that a private agency or
Yeah, InterHab is the state association for providers of intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Okay, and you all resource these individuals to help out in this place?
Right, we have 48 provider members across Kansas.
Fantastic. And it looks like you said that you guys were neutral. As one of my chairmen is fond of saying, it looks like you're emphatically neutral. Or
yeah. I think we would just like to see some of these changes explored or replaced before being positive.
Mr. Chairman, if you allow me, the reason that I wanted to ask you some questions, seems like some of the changes that you want to make actually put you in an opponent stance more so than neutral. Going to Section 5B, you kind of brushed over it, but what it says here in your testimony, quote, subject to appropriations on or before December 31st, 2026, the Secretary shall achieve rate parity across all state waiver programs administered by the Secretary. Thereafter, the Secretary shall require that an increase in the rate for one waiver program is matched with an equivalent increase in rates for all other waiver programs. Why did you want to have that stricken?
So all of the waivers are unique in their own way, and I can only speak personally the IDD waiver as our providers can state, and I can't speak for the rates across all of the other, the rest of the system, I guess. So I would just look that, we look at those very individually as all the waivers are so different.
And Mr. Chairman, final question. Were you involved in the drafting of the bill? Or
I was
are
not.
You coming to it late?
InterHab was not contacted prior to this bill.
You guys weren't contacted prior to it? Would you be open to working with the originators?
We would
of the
love
bill?
to collaborate if that option was available.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Christy Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I actually agree with you on that item letter B, that should be stricken because that could be very costly and not achieve what is being tried to achieve in this bill. But my question is, did InterHab take a look at all the potential costs this may have and the reduction in services that it may actually create, which would be counterproductive? And I say that because the cost for the providers will go up, and that sounds wonderful. But on the other hand, that may restrict budgets. It may restrict, the amount of Medicaid that we're spending per individual, just because of the professional certification program, because of the increase in wages, which is going to, of course, cost the state of Kansas more. So I didn't know if you had done a review on that, and if there's any part of this is a concern for maximizing the number of people we can help.
Absolutely. So when looking back at the professionalization, which is why we created that apprenticeship program at no cost to providers, because I guess I can speak personally, I used to be in the training and development role at InterHab, and it is very costly for providers to participate in any training. And so that's why we went about it this way. That being said, we would agree and want it to be a voluntary program because we don't want that cost to be handed down to the providers. So when we look at what the cost might be for this bill, that is definitely one of our concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was also trying to hit on the fact that the hourly rate will go up for each of these positions. Potentially, whenever you certify something, you create a new program. And then, of course, that's going to have an impact, a fiscal impact for our state. And I just wouldn't want it to have a negative consequence. That means fewer people are actually being able to be serviced because we have restraints financially. Because we do, here in the state of Kansas, vote continuously for increased Medicaid benefits and enhancements. And so this would, in fact, be another enhancement. So that was my thought.
Absolutely. So the last time we got a rate increase was about 3 years ago. We got a very generous rate increase from the legislature. We'll be back in committee this year asking for another rate increase because we have to continue to build capacity. We know there's a workforce shortage. That last rate increase allowed lots of providers to up their base pay to around $15 an hour. We want that to continue to grow. And again, we can't do that without increased rates. And then if you throw on additional training that's costing the provider, it just adds to it.
Representative Laura Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. When you were talking about the apprenticeship program that InterHab has worked with the Department of Commerce on, now is that for all providers or just for InterHab providers?
It is for all providers. We have a larger number of InterHab members. They obviously get regular communications, but we do have multiple non-InterHab members that are participating in the program.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I am seeing no further questions for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the suggestions.
Can I make a comment really quick?
Hold on, just a second. Come to the microphone, please. Restate your name. This is not a debate.
Sorry, it's really quick. InterHab did participate in the development of this bill. They were members of the KCDD IDD Health Coalition, so it's whether or not they participated in those meetings to develop the bill, but the executive director with InterHab has been on those invites and has joined in a few of the calls.
Point taken. All right, next, neutral. Department of Aging and Disabilities. Did you want to weigh in, or are you written only? Okay, we'll take that written only. Rachel Newman already went. Are there any other written or oral testimony for neutral? All right, seeing none. Are there any opponents to this bill? All right, seeing none, we'll close the bill hearing. Representative Penn.
Mr. Chairman, is this on? Yeah, there we are. I just wanted to say thank you for that courtesy that you showed the earlier proponent. She had asked for that grace, and that was extremely respectful of you. And it just did my heart some good to see that happen the way that it did. Thank you for that.
You bet. Okay, we're going to move on to Bill HB 2343, and with an explanation on the bill, Charles Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. This bill seeks to improve the business climate for home-based businesses, and it makes some limitations, it creates some limitations on municipalities with respect to regulations. And the first part of the bill is the definition section. This is fairly important because it defines what a home-based business is. As one would expect, it's any business that is owned by the owner or tenant of a residential dwelling and operated by the owner or tenant at the location of the residential dwelling. There's a couple of terms that are used throughout the bill. One is no-impact home-based business. The other is rural no-impact home-based business. And there are a couple of additional requirements with respect to that terminology. One is that a no-impact home-based business it requires that the number of on-site employees and clients doesn't exceed the municipal occupancy limit for the property. Business activities have to be limited to the sale of lawful goods and services. The business should not generate additional on-street parking or substantial traffic. And the business has to occur inside the residential dwelling or within the private premises and not be visible from the street. A rural no-impact home-based business, the requirements are a bit looser. The definition provides that this type of business would be located outside the boundaries of a city or with private premises exceeding 1 acre in size. And the limitations with respect to this business are simply that only the sale of lawful goods and services and that the business occur inside the residential dwelling or within the property limits. Section 3 pertains to the permitted use for these types of businesses. It basically provides that the use of a residential dwelling for either a no-impact home-based business or a rural no-impact home-based business shall be a permitted use. And that permitted use is to supersede deed restrictions, covenants, or agreements restricting the use of land and other provisions on and after July 1st, 2025, when a no-impact home-based business or rural home-based business, enters into one of those agreements. Section 4 pertains to some items that a municipality cannot do. Municipality cannot prohibit these businesses or otherwise require an application for a license, a permit, or other type of prior approval to operate these types of businesses. Section 5, a municipality may establish certain regulations if they're narrowly tailored. That would be the regulations for the protection of the public health and safety, like fire and building codes, health and sanitation, transportation, traffic control, regulations for compliance with state and federal law, and payment of taxes. And again, those regulations must be narrowly tailored. There's a paragraph there on page 2 between lines 24 and 32 that requires that when a municipality is considering regulations to apply to these businesses, that the municipality identify factors differentiating a home-based business from the rural home-based business, including relative isolation of that business, relative size of the premises, proximity to other residences, and is to apply an analysis that would favor less regulation for the rural, no-impact home-based business. Section 6, toward the bottom of page 2, provides some restrictions with respect to these, with respect to a no-impact home-based business. Such a business cannot sell illegal drugs or liquor. It may not operate a structured sober living home for drug or alcohol-based recovery, sale of pornography, or nude or topless dancing or other adult-oriented businesses. Section 7 also provides some restrictions for a municipality. Municipality should not require, as a condition of operating one of these businesses, rezoning or the installation of fire sprinklers. Municipality shall also not require these businesses to undergo fire or building inspections if such inspections are also if they're not applied to similar residences that are not operating such a business. Finally, Section 8 provides a standard for judicial review of regulations that are challenged. That standard is the municipality must establish by clear and convincing evidence that the regulation complies with the Act. This Act would take effect on July 1st, 2025, if enacted.
All right, committee, any questions for the reviser? Representative Christy Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on Section 3, page 2, when it says the use of the residential dwelling for a no-impact home-based business or a rural no-impact home-based business shall be a permitted use, and this permitted use shall supersede any other. The others that are listed here, the covenants, the common interest ownership, would that include, or is that the similar definition of an HOA?
So I think that would probably, the language is fairly broad. Other document applicable to a common interest ownership community. So it would be, although it doesn't specifically mention that, it's, I think, a reasonable interpretation that it could include that.
So if this body wanted to be reasonably clear, they would need to probably add or allow HOAs to stand as separate entities than what's listed.
That would be the best course, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Any further questions? Seeing none. All right, we'll move on to oral proponents. And we're going to start with Eric Stafford from the Kansas Chamber.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today in support of House Bill 2343, similar to a bill last year in this committee that we also testified in support of in terms of providing the opportunity for home-based businesses to operate without excessive local government restrictions. You see several companies listed in our testimony that started in their garage, several big companies today. Just like we talk about in tax committee or other committees, not every big business started that way. Most of them didn't. Most of them started with an idea and a dream and hard work and dedication to grow into what they are today. So we believe that this is a good balance between rules and regulations and the opportunity for economic success in our country and in our state, but also providing the reasonableness for municipalities and local units of government to moderately regulate home-based businesses and prevent what could become a problematic situation for others within the neighborhood. So happy to answer any questions you guys have. We were kind of here more as an us two, supporting the team of people that had introduced the bill, but I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'd respectfully defer.
Sorry, you
No,
were
happy to answer any questions, and I'll let some of the other proponents.
Were
get
you
into
written
it.
only? Were you?
No, I
call
was
you?
planning to speak.
Okay.
Yes, planning to speak. I might have just gotten ahead early, getting testimony submitted.
All right, so, all right, with a nice, reasonable question, Representative Clayton.
Always, always.
Did you really just say, uh-oh? I mean, I could have been telling you how amazing this was. No, so I did a little bit of Googling, and apparently the Home-Based Business Fairness Act is an American Legislative Exchange Council bill. Did you guys know about that? Do you think that this is like a Kansas-based bill, or what do you think?
That this is an ALEC bill?
Uh-huh.
I am not familiar with that, no.
Okay, right on, man. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
Yeah, I think it's also an AFP bill and an OSP bill, so all the good guys are in this one. And seeing no further questions. Representative Christy Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I could probably refer this to someone else, but property rights are often something that's very important. We talk about that frequently. You live in maybe in a community where you very much cherish that privacy, that peace, tranquility, whatever it is. There are some types of home businesses. So this is the question. There are some types of home businesses, whether you're teaching swimming lessons or it's a home daycare, or you have large numbers of individuals that might be living in that resident. Do you not think that property rights in some cases should perhaps supersede what this bill allows? Because this bill, carte blanche, allows all home-based businesses. You're right,
yeah,
it's not all, but
yeah.
it would include the ones that I mentioned.
Yeah, I think that's where the no impact provision comes in, as long as it's not a nuisance for the neighborhood. I think it provides reasonable restrictions. It's not allowing to have the business operate in the front yard, I don't think. I think it's pretty clear about that too. So I think there are reasonable restrictions in place with the language that's in 2343 today. But I think that's why it's trying to strike that good balance between your property rights and my property rights as next door neighbors of being able to allow me to operate my business in my home, you know, versus you saying no because you have a house next door. But it's intended to ensure that there's not a significant impact in the neighborhood. I feel like the language is pretty clear about that.
I guess, just a follow-up question. I think that many HOAs do not allow a daycare. You know, they might allow something if they never saw it, but they don't allow it. So in this bill, that would no longer exist. Is that correct? Would there be any grandfathering in, anything that you could comment on?
I'm going to do, Representative and Mr. Chairman, what any good proponent of solid legislation would do and punt to somebody else, if you don't mind.
Representative, there's a definition of no impact home-based business in the bottom third of page 1. It might be subjective and it might need some tuning up, but they've gone out of their way to kind of define that with, as far as you can't be parking, can't require parking and all that, or increase traffic. So, all right, no further questions for you, sir. Moving on to Elizabeth Patton.
Okay, thank you.
Oh. I'm sorry, Eric, come back. Representative Melton, we didn't see you over there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So convince me why we should be involved in this and not leave this with local government, because what works in Paola, say, does not work in Prairie Village. And I'm a little bit concerned of running a daycare versus selling guns out of a house.
Sorry, I'm trying to use that example and be thoughtful here how I respond. I think those are two very different examples of what could be impacted. But again, I think for somebody who wants to, in today's modern economy, having the ability to operate a business or even start a business out of their home, whether it's a daycare or a future Amazon, an unknown company that could be out there. I think guns are a little different because I would anticipate that they're probably regulated. I'm no gun law expert. I would think there's probably some heavy restrictions there. I don't know if that's a fair comparison to a child care facility, but if that's what you're choosing to operate, and again, you're following within the confines of the language that you're not impacting traffic flow and all that, it's my property, right? It's my home, and that's what I'm choosing to do. So I think where we've seen, I'm not going to use the word most. I think some is fair, where we've seen local governments in Kansas and other states try to take an aggressive step into commerce. I don't believe that should be the role of local governments in terms of, I know we have local control, but should local governments be setting minimum wage requirements and paid sick leave requirements and income tax requirements? I would disagree. I think that should be a uniform approach, and I think that as we're dealing with regulations of businesses, to the extent possible, we're not impacting the licensing or registration process of local governments that they have today, but having a uniform approach and standard to follow for business owners, so it's not a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis, is a fair request for the legislature to consider.
All right, seeing no further questions. Now Elizabeth Patton.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Elizabeth Patton, and I am the State Director for Americans for Prosperity. And we are happy to support this bill, HB 2343, for home-based businesses. I think based on, I just wanted to say a couple things based on the previous conferee, and we do feel like this bill does a good job of balancing property rights with reasonable limits on entrepreneurship. And we are excited to support this bill largely because the Small Business Administration estimates that 50% of all businesses are actually home businesses. And so when we think about technology and our current economy and our culture, especially as it's changed post-pandemic, and we think about the future of entrepreneurship and remote work, this is about empowering the American worker. And it's about empowering American workers, more specifically, women and actually minority populations. We have some studies as well that demonstrate that those are the highest percentage of populations who take part in home-based businesses, and allowing for this to create what we see as a kind of a freedom baseline for our state to make sure that we have some consistent opportunities to make sure that our state is open for business for anybody who has an idea, who wants to improve their own life, who wants to make sure that their creativity is perhaps turning into some income. I think that, for example, we're talking about a variety of different types of businesses, but even, for instance, Etsy sellers have increased in the last few years by, I want to check I don't have it pulled up, but I want to say by almost 75%. So we support this bill primarily because we think it prompts government to kind of rethink perhaps outdated or overly restrictive rules, or maybe rules that were created, or zoning rules that maybe aren't considering where current economy and our culture and our society have been moving, and that there is a balance there. Absolutely. But we do think that this bill strikes that balance. We feel like this is a huge step in the right direction for being almost think of it as an incubator. The best incubator for eventually a larger business is one that starts at home. And we've seen that time and again, and I know that that was probably addressed by some of our other conferees as well as examples in their testimony, but we've seen that time and again. So with that, I would be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
All right, committee questions. Representative Clayton.
Thank you. So you mentioned Etsy, and I'm a strong supporter of that. That's the way my daughter made some extra money. Tell me, help me understand, walk me through how an Etsy business would require rezoning?
It just depends. So my point is there's a lot that can be done on Etsy, right? And there is, there are a lot of examples of home businesses, and I think you might be surprised in Kansas in the inconsistency in some of the municipalities in what would be called like a cottage industry and what is allowed and what is not allowed. There have been some lawsuits even recently around some of that that were ultimately successful to the benefit of the entrepreneur. And so I would be happy to pull some of that information and send it to you.
Just going to ask if you could cite some of those lawsuits.
Yeah,
that would be great.
Sorry, yes, I would be happy to. When I get back to my computer, I can pull those items up for reference and send those to you for an example, and why we need to make sure that, to your point, you're right, you would be surprised that in some instances, even some of the things on Etsy might be precluded from being a home-based business that's successful even in Kansas.
Representative Osmond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Would an Airbnb be considered a no-impact home-based business?
I would defer to some fellow conferees on the specifics of that with the language of the bill, but I would have to take a closer look at that. Yep.
Representative Christy Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So going back to the deed restricted, I think that would include HOA, so that is in the language. It isn't government telling anyone what to do, because I do agree with you that municipalities should have less restrictions. So that part I agree with, but that's individuals that have chosen as an area, they're paying extra for those amenities. And so I am concerned with that language right there, and I want to comment on that because that isn't government telling anyone what to do. That's individuals. Those are individual property owners.
I see your point on that, and to your point that somebody who chose to live in that neighborhood chose to subscribe themselves to the HOA with that contract when they purchased a home within that, separate from the local municipality. I think that there's probably again, some additional opportunity to strike a balance in there, and I think, without speaking for my other conferees, would be happy to look at some maybe alternative language there that could maybe address some of those concerns. But at the end of the day, for most of it, we did feel like when we did a policy review on this, that it did a good job of striking that balance with nuisance and with property rights, with entrepreneurship.
All right, seeing no further questions.
Okay,
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Andrew Weens.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Andrew Weens with Dugan Consulting Group, speaking with you on behalf of Opportunity Solutions Project today. Like the other conferees, I'm pleased to speak in support of House Bill 2343. You have heard what this bill does, creates the No Impact Home-Based Business Fairness Act, limits the ability of municipalities to overregulate such businesses. I think Eric talked about this, but small businesses are the backbone of our economy. Many of them start at home, whether it's around the kitchen table, maybe in the garage, or even in an apartment living room. And nationally, as Liz just mentioned, roughly half of all businesses start at home, and a lot of them operate entirely online with just a few employees. But in Kansas, sometimes entrepreneurs face an inconsistent patchwork of local regulations that make starting and running a home business unpredictable and in some cases impossible. So that's the reason this bill is before you today. I think local governments have placed well-intended but sometimes still onerous restrictions on homeowners seeking to launch businesses inside their homes. And I have some examples of that. I think that was asked for earlier. There's some municipalities in Kansas that say you can't use more than 20% of the floor area for the home-based businesses. Some limit to family members residing in the home. Some say no on-site sales to the general public. There's others that don't let you use the garage. There's some that limit customer visit hours to certain times of day. Repair of items can only occur if the delivery or pickup of the item happens outside the home. Not more than 20% of the floor area. One customer at a time. Must reside in the home. Those are some of the restrictions in municipalities across the state. And again, while we think they might be well-intended regulations, some of these restrictions seem pretty arbitrary, and we believe they undermine innovation, job creation, and economic growth. So that's why we're bringing the bill, or supporting the bill that's been brought to you by Representative Turk, and happy to answer questions at the appropriate time, but we do stand in support. Thank you.
All right, committee, any questions? Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you provide us with any specific examples of Kansas businesses that had to close due to any of these regulations that you listed?
Thank you, Representative and Mr. Chairman. I don't know any examples of specific businesses that had to close, but I certainly think these regulations would have a chilling effect on the ability to even start these businesses, which is not something we want to be encouraging.
Okay, but no businesses directly closed in Kansas?
I didn't say that. I said I'm not aware of any specific ones. I would think there are some that had to close after they had perhaps a local government crackdown on the business that they were operating, but I don't know any specific names.
Okay, so you don't know any specific names. It's conjecture. Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you. It seems like what you're trying to do is a great thing. And the problem always seems to be you have the people who are the dreamers and workers, and then you have the regulators who just can't seem to get out of that rut. And I think that's the reason the state doesn't grow. It just regulates itself to death to where people just give up, and I hope this state keeps enough air in it so it can get some traction and make some of itself.
Yeah, thanks, Representative. I do think, yeah, this is a reasonable approach with the no impact thing. I mean, local governments are still able to regulate home-based businesses, but if you qualify under this framework of a no impact home-based business, then you should be free to go about your business, if you will.
All right, seeing no further questions for you.
Thank you.
Are there any other oral proponents? Vice Chair Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I have provided written testimony, but I'd like to steer you to other written testimony provided by a constituent in the S drive. It would be titled Proponent Written Testimony, Lenexa Resident, for this bill. You are looking for firsthand how rubber meets the road testimony. This is it. And I know so often we stick it in the S drive and then we don't get to it. I'm urging you to put 2 seconds down and read through that testimony. I won't read it to you, but engulf yourself with the reality of what we're trying to do here. This person is truly impacted by overregulation, and they deserve to be, their story deserves to be heard. I want to just touch on a few things here. Please read through my testimony as well if you have time. But let me dive into some comments that were made. Something about an ALEC bill, maybe. It's pretty common around all the states. This particular bill has been extensively worked both through this body in previous years and with municipalities. We have worked a thin line between all of these subjects that we brought up, between property rights and local control and what role the state has in this. And it has provided at least a room for discussion in all of these categories. This bill is exclusively tailored for Kansas by Kansas constituents, like this Lenexa resident, Jennifer and Larry Freestone of Lenexa. Read their story, it's impactful. For me, this hits really close to home. I grew up in a lower middle class on our best day household, where my mother was a secretary back when they still called it secretary. My father worked generally labor jobs for the Army Corps Engineers at the lake system here in Kansas. And my mom worked an in-home business. She sold Mary Kay. We're all very familiar with this occupation. We know those pink vehicles driving by. We see them, we recognize them. I was able to participate in sports, get shoes on my feet, even though sometimes it came from Walmart, and buy a baseball glove every year because my mom worked her butt off in her home-based business back when there wasn't overregulation. In some of these areas, they restrict how much of your own house you can use. So I heard Bill Gates and Microsoft brought up, in some of these municipalities, in some of these areas, some of these cities, there would be no Bill Gates. Because what happens when your kitchen table, and you're only allowed 25% of your house to go towards your business, and you've got four rooms, and your table fills up with computer components. Can you not put it in your bedroom? And who's gonna come and do that? All this does is incentivize people to just not report their home-based business. And so often when we bring up discussions here in this body, do we take it to the extreme and bring in factors that have absolutely nothing to do with it? And I don't mean to pick on anybody, but we brought up gun sales with this. Guys, that's federally regulated. That would be an FFL. The ATF comes in and regulates that, not this. This bill does not impact that at all. This gives every municipality plenty of opportunity to negotiate every single one of these circumstances brought up, like Airbnbs. Well, that absolutely depends on its impact. This is a no-impact business. So if an Airbnb increases traffic, well, then that excludes that Airbnb. All right, if it exceeds the residential occupancy of the city, then that excludes that Airbnb. And if it doesn't, well, then that falls within the confines of this. Examples of businesses. Examples of businesses that close. Well, you're not going to get that. Who gathers that information? What you're going to get is a home-based business that just isn't going to self-report. You're going to force them into just being quiet. Like so many of the other residents that have brought this to me that didn't feel comfortable bringing this up in front of this committee. They wouldn't provide testimony because they were afraid that if they did, went on the record, that their municipality would come back and they'd pay for it. All we're trying to do with this particular legislation is create an environment for which these home-based businesses can be innovative and be competitive. They can provide for their families. Post-COVID, the world has changed. How many businesses retreated to their confines of their homes during COVID? Countless, mine included. All this is trying to do is allow people the right to an income. And I'll stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions? Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for those words, Mr. Vice Chairman. Quick question. When it comes to the concept of municipalities being able to control peace, safety, security inside their confines and environment, as well as the concept of, or the the feeling of not in my neighborhood, not in my backyard, things of that nature. What would you say about those types of accusations as being critical of this bill? And then second, any activities that would be contrary to or criminal in the code, like starting up a home-based weed business or something to that effect, is that covered with this bill?
Well, let me get the second question for, yes, that's, Charles went over that line specifically, highlighting that it literally excludes those things. Now, do me a favor and rephrase your first question so that I think I could guess at what you're getting at, but let me just.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, when it comes to any municipality or locality or city or county government saying that this bill is contrary to how they do zoning or it inhibits their or infringes upon their ability to provide safety or peace, disturbances of the peace, things of that nature for their neighborhoods or for their footprints, how do you answer to that?
Well, I mean, I think we'd go back to the no impact. I mean, the municipalities have, when these companies come to their board hearings or their approval hearings, they have that conversation there. So if that is in question, that's brought up in that level of the discussion. Now the rezoning, you brought up another subject, the rezoning. If you review that testimony from that Lenexa resident, you'll see exactly how the rezoning conversation comes into the process. And this particular resident goes through multiple layers of discussions, and then the final verdict, or before she's told or denied, is that we believe you should rezone. Well, then that is just another barrier of restriction of regulatory burdens that's gonna keep that person from opening that business. If you keep throwing in these hurdles, then they're not gonna open the business, or if they do, they're gonna do it under the radar. So then that doesn't impact the community. If you allow these companies to get started, these startups, well, now you've got another source of taxable income. Whereas if you throw every hurdle in their way, then they're either not gonna open the business or they're gonna do it quietly, and then nobody benefits from it.
All right, in the interest of time, we got to move on. We're going to go to the oral opponents and start with Kansas Association of Counties.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I am Jay Hall, the Deputy Director and General Counsel for the Kansas Association of Counties. When I look at this bill, I think if it's truly a no-impact business, I think that's great. It means that there's no impact. That also means that the municipality, in my case the county, won't receive any complaints. And if we don't receive any complaints, we're not going to do anything about that particular business. But I can tell you, as somebody that started their career dealing with zoning complaints, actually, that this bill essentially would come down to how much does your neighbor like you? How much does your neighbor like you? Do you get along with your neighbor? Because I tell you, if you do not get along with your neighbor, then that means that they will be calling the county and they will say that my neighbor's running an illegal business. Can you please come out and make them stop? That's what happens when you start dealing with these types of things, is that it's not the county going out and looking for these things. It's actually the neighbor calling and saying, hey, my neighbor who I don't like, although they don't say that on the phone call, they'll say, my neighbor is doing something they shouldn't be allowed to do. Can you come out and deal with it? And that is how the county often gets involved in these types of things, is that there is a dispute between neighbors and that brings them out. We also have the issue of incompatible uses, and just to give you an example, right now throughout Kansas, there are these data farms or these data mining centers or crypto mining centers that they're trying to put in a lot of communities. And right now, counties are dealing with how to zone these areas. And I see in this bill that if it's a rural no-impact home-based business, that means that essentially somebody could buy a residential lot, have somebody live on that lot, and throw a crypto mining center in the backyard, and as long as they have an acre, that's perfectly within the confines of this bill, even though we are currently struggling with how those areas should be zoned, because one of the things with those particular buildings is that it takes a lot of cooling power, a lot of electricity in order to service those. And so that's just one of the examples that I would come to on this particular bill as to why we at the KAC have concerns. I know we are short on time, so I will stand for questions at this point.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you. I actually did not even think about crypto mining when it came to this. Could you tell us just a little bit more, just an estimate of like the cost impact? Like say that someone set that up in a residential neighborhood, what does that do to the local utilities or the local grid?
I don't have the numbers in front of me to give you an estimate on what it would do to the local utilities and the grid. I do know that there are some fire concerns, and I noticed in here that you can't require sprinklers and that sort of thing in those facilities if you don't require that in other similarly situated facilities. And so one of the concerns when a lot of our zoning professionals are looking at these types of buildings is the fire aspect, because they are running a lot of computer equipment. It does cause a lot of heat, and that does create a higher fire risk than other types of facilities. So that's what they're looking at when they are zoning these in other situations, and I'm sure they would look at that in that situation as well.
All right, seeing no further questions, we'll move on. Okay. Representative Laura Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have you had any instances with counties where you have had run into this crypto business being run out of people's homes? Has that issue come up here in the state?
Being run in homes? At this point, no, but I think under this bill, it would allow it simply because at that point, you could have just an acre and then it would be a no impact business because obviously you don't have people going to and from that crypto mining operation on a regular basis.
Okay, but there has been no issues currently in your counties?
No, not right now.
Okay.
It's more been a zoning issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Representative Corbett.
How many counties in Kansas are not zoned at all?
How many are not zoned? Approximately 50.
And it seems so the counties that are not zoned seem to be a little more, they're growing a little faster. You can get your stuff done. And everybody seems to be moving on. It seems like in your situation, you're always looking for the why not, or the more taxes I could get from, instead of trying to let somebody get that first step up and try to get along. And that seems to be what government's problem is. They're afraid that they might miss a tax dollar from somebody instead of trying to let things grow a little bit.
I would say that the fastest growing counties in Kansas tend to be those that are zoned. Because they tend to be some of our larger counties anyway, so, and all of those are zoned.
All right. Next, we're going to move to the league. Nathan.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nathan Eberline with the League of Kansas Municipalities. I've raised a number of the same points that you have heard on other occasions, where we stand for home rule, and that reflects the vast differences that we see across our state from one city to the other city. I have raised a few examples. I will confess that I wrote most of this after the Super Bowl on Sunday to make sure it was to you on time. So there's a little bit of a scattershot in some of the approach here, but I wanted to give you a few examples to consider. One point that I have had since I've been back with the league is requests from legislators with the query being, what are we going to do about HOAs? That is a regular issue that we are facing, typically more with our urban areas, but again, we've got 84% of Kansans that live within cities, and so that tends to be an issue, and different cities are approaching it in a different manner. We are concerned about what the effect is going to be on this in relation to maintaining the integrity of our communities. I raised concerns about the Equal Protection Clause. Representative Williams, you mentioned the HOAs. I would also be curious to hear more about whether the implications on the contract clause applies. I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but those are points that I think come up. I also have questions in relation to the fire marshal and some of the safety elements as it relates to this. But mostly I'm just posing these questions in how this testimony came together. I put a request out over the weekend when we found that this bill was going to be here and needed testimony by Monday to our city managers across the state. And we were fortunate in that we had responses from east to west and raising questions about things like the HOAs, the Airbnbs, questions as it relates to the actual effects on parking, businesses involving animals. There was a notation that there is language in here that provides for issues of sight and sound. But one of our more rural cities asked about, are we able to do anything that relates to smell issues that come up? I will take that back to Andrew's point, and I appreciate him walking through all of his different concerns and examples of places that may have city regulations in relation to the business side of things. We want to be able to hear if there are specific issues and be able to address those narrowly and modestly without doing a large sweeping change. One effect that, and Jay talked about this a little bit as well, the types of questions, complaints that we receive at the city level and the county level, those then become the issues that you are going to have at the state level, because you'll be the ones charged with regulating these pieces. By taking it away from the local where there's an ability to actually be responsive when those issues come up, they come to you now. Eric made the point about he thinks that it's fair approach for the state to decide whether it wants to enact a statewide approach, and he is absolutely right. It is clearly within your purview, but there are implications when we take that away from the level of government that is closest to the people and able to respond to what the needs of those communities, the expectations of those community are. Very happy to answer questions. I'm happy to seek out more information. As I mentioned, there's a certain scattershot approach, but there's also written testimony from both City of Overland Park, Garden City, that speaks to some of their specific concerns. I would just draw attention to that, but with the wide variety that we have of cities that are big and small, urban, rural, there are distinct differences in characters to each of those communities, and we try to be responsive to them. So happy to provide anything else that might be useful.
All right, seeing no questions.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have the City of Shawnee. Are you here? Testify.
Mr. Chairman, Dick Carter on behalf of the City of Shawnee. Our testimony was intended to be written only. Happy to answer any questions if there are any, but for the record.
All right, and Overland Park also?
Yes, sir.
Written only?
Yes, sir.
Okay, are there any other opponents that wish to testify? Please introduce yourself. Do we have your testimony?
Yeah, I've written testimony from the City of Topeka. My name is Dan Warner. I'm the Planning Division Director for the City of Topeka under the Planning and Development Department. I'm going to talk specifically about how Topeka regulates home-based businesses, but a couple points first. We do acknowledge in our written comments that there were some improvements from the previous year's legislation regarding this bill, specifically on parking and individuals allowed at the location. We do think HB 2343 could bypass zoning regulations meant to restrict commercial uses in residential areas. So for instance, the no impact term is difficult to interpret as it could allow heavy commercial uses such as car sales or industrial operations under the guise of no impact businesses. So specifically about Topeka's home-based business regulations. So Topeka regulates home-based businesses as an accessory use to residential uses on the property. So what that means is, you've got residential zoning, and that primary use for that residential zoning is a residential unit. It's the house, it's the apartment, whatever that might be. That's the primary use under zoning for that property. We regulate home-based businesses as an accessory use, meaning it's smaller, it's within the house, it's not the primary use, it's a part of the house. So with that, we also have requirements in place so that home-based businesses don't detract from the residential character of the neighborhood. So for instance, all activities have to be within the home. We do limit to 1 additional employee, and we also limit hours of operation. So the city requires an administrative permit. So meaning we don't take this to the governing body, it's an administrative, we approve it as staff. So some examples of recent permits. We've approved nail and hair salons, insurance office, businesses that were making cookies and shipping those out. So maybe there's businesses making 3D printing and shipping those out. Also online sales, so eBay and that sort of thing. All have been approved as home-based businesses in Topeka. So final point here, local regulation of home-based businesses help to ensure those businesses remain accessory to the residential use and limit the impact on the character of the neighborhood. And the city respectfully requests that the bill not be passed out of committee.
All right, committee, any questions? Just point of clarification. You have to have a permit in the city of Topeka to sell something on eBay?
If it's a home-based business type, yes. If they ask.
Right, okay. No further questions. All right, we're going to close the hearing on 2343. And committee, I know we're over time, but we're also are short on days. We're going to try to pass a bill out. HB 2088. This is the fast track permitting bill. I believe that we have had adequate time for the interested parties to get together and form somewhat of an agreement on an amendment. And so we'll start with a brief description of what the bill does, and then we'll talk about a balloon amendment.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. So HB 2888 sets out a fast-track procedure to streamline city, county, and other local governmental review processes for building permits. And that's what
Any questions on what the bill does? All right, seeing none, would you go ahead and pass out an amendment or have somebody pass it out and then you can explain it? Committee, as you look through this amendment, there is a box on the right-hand side of the first page that explains what the amendment does. And I'll have Charles kind of briefly go through that.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. So yes, as the chairman pointed out, if you look at the box to the right there, it just lists out what this amendment does. First, we're removing industrial developments as eligible for fast-track treatment. Secondly, we're removing the provision that included an appeal to a zoning board within the fast-track treatment. And this amendment, not only does it strike some text, but it also would remove Section 5. The third thing this amendment does is if there is a written waiver or statement from the applicant with respect to seeking phased permitting. That would be an exception to the 60-day deadline. The fourth thing is it changes when an application is deemed submitted to a local government, and also when a written notice of a decision is deemed issued by a local government, but only with respect to United States mail. And you can see that on page 3 of the amendment. The fifth thing, it adds a section that requires authorizations to discharge stormwater runoff from construction activities to be issued by the Secretary of Health and Environment to an applicant within 45 days, and that's on page 3 of the amendment. I'd also just note that the amendment has not been proofed, so when it goes through our publications department, there may be non-substantive changes.
Okay. So this was an attempt to address some of the concerns that were mentioned previously, especially the zoning portion where constituents would be able to weigh in on a zoning change. So we took that entire section out, and that was the most glaring section. The rest, the KDH&E was, their health and environment was slowing down the process sometimes, so we gave them a deadline as well to keep the process moving. Are there any questions for the reviser on what the amendment does? Representative Wilcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't know if we know the answer to this. What happens if KDHE exceeds that 45 days?
There's no specific provision in, there's no penalty or any specific provision as to that. It's just, you know, a requirement that they meet that 45 days, but there's no specific provision of anything that would happen.
Representative, if there's a problem, we will take their funding.
I mean, I love the idea of putting that deadline on there. I don't know if they don't do it, it's approved. Tough luck, we don't abide by it. I mean, right now, we just say you have to do it, and there's no repercussion if they don't.
Okay. Point taken. If they don't abide by it, I promise you there'll be ramifications. Any other questions on what the amendment does? Representative Laura Williams.
I don't know who best, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know who would be best to understand this. Sorry, I'm just trying to read it really quick. Application, so page 1, line 26, where it amends, the application does not include a zoning board of appeals or planning commission designated as a zoning board of appeals. So does this include once that process had started, then it's no longer applicable to fast track? Then the local government's way that they process permits, does that then allow for that process to take place and the time limit is not put on them with the planning commission or the zoning board of appeals?
Charles?
Yeah, so the language specifically provides that application doesn't include an appeal to a zoning board of appeals or planning commission. So I'm not quite sure I understand your question, but that kind of appeal would not be required to meet the would not be required to meet the 60-day time limit or any other requirements of the bill.
I think it was an attempt to tie in, since we struck section 5, this addresses that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions on what the amendment does? Any discussion on the amendment? All right, seeing none, with a motion to pass the amendment, Vice Chair Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we pass the amendment as presented.
Second?
Second.
Representative Clayton. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. All against the amendment, say no. Amendment passes. Any further discussion on the bill? All right, seeing none. Representative Turk with a motion to pass as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that Commerce Committee pass out House Bill number 2088 as amended.
Seconded by Representative Wassinger. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of passing as amended, say aye. Aye. All against, say no. Motion passes. All right, committee, thanks for that. That'll get it out to the floor and save us a little bit of time on Thursdays. We'll see you Thursday. Again, no meeting tomorrow. Tomorrow's bills are moved to Thursday. Thursdays are moved to Friday. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.